Okay, so good morning, everyone, on this strange weather morning and November 30th. In case you're watching the recording and want to know what day we recorded. Um, so um, I just want to say, and I'll reiterate at the end, and also with the email when I send the recording, that the whole month of December we will not have class. Next Sunday, it's just I'm going to be too on spielkas, as they say in Yiddish. For after I'll be here for Minyan, but then got to go home to pack and pace, which is my travel mode. So and then I'll be in Israel the next 3 Sundays, but coming back on Sunday the 28th, but uh, landing at like 6 in the morning. So, and I don't sleep on planes, so I don't think I'll be leading Talmud class that morning on the 28th. So all of December is off. That's our winter break, and we'll be back on the first Sunday in January. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We're on this red S on page 148 of the Koran PDF, or if you're following in Safaria, it's 26B, 26B, wherever the S-like symbol is on the page. So we're talking about digging cisterns, and there's a tree on your neighbor's property. So the Mishnah teaches that if he was digging a cistern, a ditch, or a cave, he may cut downward, and the wood is his. The sage Yaakov of Hadayav. So Yaakov Hadayava. Okay, so that's, yeah, it's Aramaic, Hadayava. I just never came across this person before. Yaakov of Hadayava, or it could be, I don't know why there's not a B next to him, or a P, to tell us who he is. Yaakov Hadayava. I'm just interested about his name, and I'm sorry about that. I want to see if I have a resource. Encyclopedia of the Sages of the Talmud, 2 volumes. So I think Yaakov is in the first volume. Well, it's Het. Yehuda. Nope. Wrong guess. Here it is. Okay. So this has every rabbi listed who's mentioned in the Talmud.
He's in Google. AI has him.
Okay, but that's okay. I don't want to go there yet.
Okay.
I'd like to do the old-fashioned way. As long as I still have books, I want to use it. Put this. Okay, so Yaakov Hadayava. Yaakov bar Avun, Yaakov bar Acha, bar Idi, Yaakov bar Dasi, bar Zavdi, Chanina, bar Susan, Gavlaya, Kfar Hanan, Gisrin, Jeremiah. He's not here. Okay, so what does AI say about him? Now you're muted, Bess.
Okay. A sage from the Babylonian Talmud posed a legal question. The name is likely a geographical reference, while Yaakov is a common Hebrew name. Not associated with a modern Israeli religious community called Yaakov, which has a similar name. Um, that's it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So all they know about him is what is this um, citation of him right here. So I guess that's why there's no P, and he is not in this encyclopedia, which is interesting. So Yaakov of Hadayav, or I would say Yaakov Hadayav. So it's Aramaic. The aleph at the end serves the same purpose as a hey in the beginning of a Hebrew word. So it means the. So so that's why in English, Yaakov of Hadiyav, so wherever Hadiyav is. Okay, raised a dilemma before Rav Chisda. To whom does the wood belong? So, in other words, the Mishnah says, he was digging a cistern, a ditch, or a cave, he may cut downward, and the wood is his. The question is, the last his, who is the his referring to? It seems that because the pronoun didn't change, like in other words, it's he the whole time, the one who's digging, why would it change to refer to, in other words, I'm digging, Michael's right next to me. So let's say Michael's the owner of the tree whose roots are extending into my property. I'm digging down to dig a cistern. I'm entitled. So the question is, who's entitled to the wood of the root of the tree that I might be digging through in order to make my cistern? It seems from a straightforward reading here, he may cut downward and the wood is his, meaning it's mine. But you could understand it that the wood could be Michael's. You could. I would say that's poor legal writing. You want to be you want to be as specific as possible when you're dealing with pronouns. But Yaakov of Hadayav says that you could read it that the wood could belong to Michael. The Mishnah says that the wood is his without specifying to which of the two individuals this refers, the owner of the tree or the owner of the land. Okay, but you understand how it would be a stretch from the straightforward reading of the text of the Mishnah. It would be a stretch to say that the wood belongs to Michael or the owner of the tree, as opposed to the one digging. Rav Chisda said to him, you learned the answer in a Mishnah in Tractate Me'ilah. If roots of a tree belonging to an ordinary person extend into a field belonging to the temple treasury, one may not derive benefit from them. But if one derive benefit from them, he is not liable for misuse of consecrated property. That is, even if one does transgress the prohibition and benefit from them, it is not considered misuse, and he is not liable to bring an offering. So, the roots of a tree, okay, so let's say it's Michael's tree again, but his roots are extending into, it's not my field, the field belongs to the temple. So therefore, his regular secular tree, the roots are extending into holy consecrated property. So the question is then, how would Michael be deriving benefit from consecrated property? Like, are they suggesting that because the roots are extending, the roots are getting the nutrients, and then the tree, let's say it's an apple tree, those apples should be considered consecrated because the roots of the tree were extending into consecrated property? But it says here, one may not derive benefit from it. But if he derived, so in other words, if you derive benefit, then it's not considered misuse. So let's look at the background just a second before we go on. Misuse of consecrated property. The halacha of misuse of consecrated property is mentioned briefly in the Torah, while the many details of its halachot are discussed extensively in Tractate Me'ilah. Misuse, Me'ilah, is defined as any unlawful benefit derived from consecrated property, as one may not use for personal gain any property that has been consecrated to God. Prohibition against misuse is severe, and that even one who acts unwittingly or by unavoidable accident is guilty of misuse and is liable to bring an offering. Furthermore, although in most situations one is not held accountable for the actions of his agent, this principle does not apply to cases of misuse. Okay, so it doesn't apply today when the temple isn't standing, but there's a lot of laws regarding consecrated property, regarding purity and impurity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now trying to understand this. Granted, if you say that we follow the tree and the roots are considered part of it, it's due to that reason that one is not liable for misuse, as a tree is not consecrated, right? The tree is standing in regular property. It's just the roots that are extending into consecrated property. So if you follow the tree, then the fruit of the tree is like the tree, standing in secular property. But if you say we follow the land, that is, the roots belong to the land's owner, why is he not liable for misuse of consecrated property, right? So if the roots of the tree are part of the tree and the roots are extending into holy property, then whatever the roots suck up and benefit the tree, the whole tree then becomes consecrated property, right? So do you follow the root or do you follow the tree? Which gets back to our question of the person digging the cistern and digging through roots of a tree that's on neighboring property. So do the roots belong to the tree? Right, so back to the case. It's my land, I'm digging a cistern. It's Michael's tree, but the roots of the tree are in my property. Do the roots belong to him or do they belong to me? So the Gemara asks, rather, what will you say? That we follow the tree? If so, say the last clause of that Mishnah, if roots of a tree belonging to the temple treasury extend into a field of an ordinary person, one may not derive benefit from them. But if one derive benefit from them, he is not liable for misuse of consecrated property. But if we follow the tree, why is he not liable for misuse of consecrated property? So let's say the tree is in the consecrated property, the root is in my property, and I'm digging the cistern. So am I liable for cutting through the root and then using the wood as firewood or whatever I want to use it for, right? Because it's considered consecrated property. So the Gemara responds, are the cases comparable? In both clauses of the Mishnah, we're dealing with growths that came thereafter. That is, after the tree was consecrated. And the Tana of the Mishnah, that is, the rabbi who wrote the Mishnah, holds that with regard to growths that grew from a consecrated plant or tree, they are not subject to the halachot of misuse of consecrated property. Only the original plant is. Consequently, there's no connection between that Mishnah and the question of whether roots are considered part of the tree or part of the land. Okay, so when you plant a tree, there are roots there. But you know that everything that is going into the ground as you plant the tree in the ground is on your property. You would never plant the tree. Michael wouldn't plant his tree on my property because it's his tree. What would he be doing putting it on my property? So the roots of the tree still belong to him. The fact that they grow, the roots grow out and might extend into my property, saying so far, that shouldn't be considered part of the original tree. So what happens later is not the subject legally to this. Well, in other words, when the roots grow out from the original planting, then if the roots extend into my property, it becomes my property. Ravina said that it is not difficult. Here, in the first clause of the Mishnah in Me'ilah, it's referring to within 16 cubits of the tree. In this case, the roots are considered part of the tree. There, in the second clause, it's referring to roots beyond 16 cubits, in which case the roots are considered part of the ground where they are found. So now Ravina is adding an extra layer of logistics here. Roots, you have to, I guess, Ravina might suggest when you plant a tree, you have to expect that the roots are going to extend out 16 cubits. So 16 times 1.5 is 24 feet. So you have to expect, you have to allow for 24 feet of root growth. Beyond that, then it can be considered, if it grows into somebody else's property, then it becomes somebody else's property. So that's what Ravina would say. So that he says the roots are considered part of the tree up to 24 feet. Okay, Ula said,
Jonah,
yes, Bess?
I'm sorry. Is this much different from an apple tree branch extending in? Michael's tree is an apple tree, and
the branches extend in the air into my property. We haven't talked about that yet.
or what about if his tree is a ginger tree and the root comes into my property and I want a piece of ginger?
Right. Well, so that would apply based on the idea of, well, first of all, people who plant something should know what it does what the particular thing does, how it grows. So I think people at the time knew how particular trees, how roots of particular trees grow, and how roots of produce grow as well. So somebody who wants to have something totally contained in their property should know better and know where to plant it. Okay, so I think Ravina's statement of 16 cubits would apply to that. If it extends, we're only talking about underground now. We're not talking about above ground. So if it extends underground beyond 16 cubits into my property, then it should be mine. Okay, Ula said, an individual who maintains a tree that is within 16 cubits of a boundary is a robber, as it draws nourishment from the neighbor's land, and one does not bring first fruits from it, since that would be a mitzvah that is fulfilled by means of a transgression. Okay, so that's how Ula is corroborating what Ravina said about the 16 cubits. So if Michael were to plant his tree 10 cubits away from my property, he should know that the roots are invading my property and that the tree is growing and thriving based on nutrients that it's getting from my land. And that's not appropriate because he's taking away nutrients from my land that I could use for my things. And therefore, if he wanted to bring first fruits from it, like the temple was standing and you're obligated to bring first fruits, he can't bring first fruits from it according to Ula, because that would be a transgression because the fruits are not really his. The Gemara asks, from where does Ula derive that measurement of the 16 cubits? If we say it's from that which we learned in a Mishnah in Shavi'it, the section that's dealing with the sabbatical year laws, this is problematic. That Mishnah teaches if there were 10 saplings scattered in a Beit Seah, one may plow the entire Beit Seah for their sake until Rosh Hashanah of the sabbatical year. Although it's prohibited to plow other land in the time leading into the sabbatical year to avoid the appearance of preparing to work the ground in that year, it is permitted to do so for the purpose of sustaining these young trees. Okay, so right? The idea of the sabbatical year is that you're supposed to let the land lie fallow. So when does the sabbatical year start? It starts on Rosh Hashanah. So then um, you're you're not allowed to work the land leading up to Rosh Hashanah. How much time is that leading up to Rosh Hashanah? We'd have to look into the Mishnah at Shavi'it. But one exception to the rule is if you have saplings. So, is it appropriate to plant saplings at the end of the at the end of the sixth year, leading into the sabbatical year, when you know that that the saplings are going to need work and maintenance and cultivation in order to ensure that they grow, and you're not allowed to do that in the sabbatical year, so why plant it? So if you planted enough ahead of time, you're still allowed to work it right up until Rosh Hashanah because you have these saplings. The Gemara calculates how much is the area of a Beit Se'ah. It is 2,500 square cubits. Yeah, so Garmide is the Aramaic name for a forearm, the basis for the measure of the cubit. Okay. So 2,500 square cubits, and how much area is allocated for each and every one of these 10 trees? It's 250 square cubits. This is not the distance that Ula taught. An area of 16 cubits is to each side of the tree is a square of 32 by 32 cubits, or 1,024 square cubits, which is much larger than 250. But rather, Ula derived the measurement from that which we learned in the following Mishnah. Instead of Shavi'it 1:6, he learns it from Shavi'it 1:5. If there were 3 large trees belonging to 3 different people in one Beit Se'ah, these trees combine, and one may plow the entire Beit Se'ah for their sake. How much is that area in cubits? It's 2,500 square cubits. How much area is that for each of the trees? It's 833 and a third. This is still more than the amount that Ula established. The Gemara answers, Ula was not precise in this matter. The Gemara asks, one can say that we say that a sage was not precise in his measurements when his ruling leads to a stringency. But do we say that he was not precise if his measurements lead to a leniency? According to the previous explanation, Ula exempts the owner of a tree from first fruits, even in a case where his tree does not in fact draw nourishment from his neighbor's field. The Gemara answers, do you maintain that we say the roots extend that far in a square? That is, one measures 16 cubits to each side of the tree? Not so. We say this with regard to a circle. That is, the roots extend in a circle surrounding the tree, as the area of a circle is smaller than that of the square circumscribing it. Okay, so it's like Lido pizza, where Lido pizza is square. We don't cut corners, right? But if you put a round pizza in a Lido box, then there's extra cardboard, right? I'm not a geometrist, but if you draw a circle, and then if you would draw a square around the circle, you got some corners of the square that the circle doesn't take up. So there's more area, not much more, but there's more area in the square that within the circle, the square that surrounds the circle than in the circle itself. Okay? Yeah. So the Gemara asks, now, by how much? So who would have thought that a Lido commercial would have entered into a Talmud class discussion? Okay. The Gemara asks, now, by how much is the area of a square greater than the area of a circle with a diameter the length of the side of that square? Okay, so you picture that. You're drawing a circle, and then you have a square around it. The square will touch 4 arcs of the circle. Okay, so the diameter of the circle will go to the side of the square. Okay, so Now, by how much is the area of a square greater than the area of a circle with a diameter, the length of the side of that square? It's greater by 1/4 of the area of the circle. Okay, so if so, I can't give you an example, a mathematical example. That much of geometry I'm not good at. If so, 768 square cubits, 3/4 of 1,024, remain for each tree. But there still remains half a cubit more based on the Mishnah's calculation. In other words, the measurement would be more accurate if a tree is considered to draw nourishment from a distance of 16.5 cubits on each side. The Gemara answers, this is why we said that Ula was not precise, and he was not precise in a manner that leads to astringency, as one brings first fruits even from a tree that stands just 16 cubits from the boundary, rather than 16.5. Okay, so that's getting to the nitty-gritty there. The Gemara cites a proof against the opinion of Ula. So Ula says 16 cubits, or 16.5 cubits, all around the tree. And beyond that is somebody else's property, but within that, it's part of the tree. Come and hear the following Mishnah in Bikurim, the Mishnah that deals with first fruits. One who buys a tree and its land brings first fruits and recites the requisite Torah verses over them. What? Is it not referring to a case where one buys any amount of land with the tree? The Gemara rejects this claim. No, it's referring to a case where one buys 16 cubits of land around the tree. Okay, so if you're going to buy the tree and the land that it's in, you have to buy the tree and a circle's worth of 16 cubits all around. The Gemara suggests, come and hear an additional proof from another Mishnah, also in Bikurim. If one bought 2 trees in the field of another, he brings first fruits and does not recite the verses because the land does not belong to him. All right, so now we're going to Michael and me. Michael has trees in his property, but I have trees in my property, and for some reason, he's buying 2 of my trees. I don't know why he would do that. What benefit is it to me to have Michael? Oh, maybe I was in debt to him for something, and so I paid off the debt with selling him 2 of my trees. Okay, so I came up with a scenario there. So he buys 2 trees that are in my property. So the Mishnah is saying that he doesn't bring the first fruits from the trees that are on my property because he doesn't own the land that the trees are planted in. He only owns the fruit that grows from the tree. It may be inferred from here that if he bought 3 trees, he does bring first fruits and recite the verses. What, is it not referring to a case where one buys any amount of land with the trees? The Gemara rejects this claim as well. No, here too, it's referring to a case where he acquires 16 cubits of land around the trees. So if he wants to bring first fruits for the trees that are on my property, he has to have also bought the requisite amount of land around those trees. Okay?
So buying the use of the trees, buying the crop rather than buying the tree.
So Michael's adding, so maybe I sold him the rights to the fruit of the tree for a number of years. So that would protect the land. It would still be my land. He only has the right to the tree. But then then we'd have to ask, what about pruning the tree to allow for greater growth? Who has the right to prune the tree? Do you have the right to prune the tree, or do I have the right to prune a tree? So I don't know about that. For this argument, it's about the land.
Preserves the land argument.
Yes.
Yeah, preserves that argument.
The Gemara suggests, come and hear proof from a Mishnah from the tractate Peah, which is the Mishnah dealing with the corner of the field set aside for the poor. And there's no limit, by the way, as to how big that corner should be. Rabbi Akiva says, the owner of land of any size is obligated in payah and in first fruits, and a lender can write a document that prevents the sabbatical year from abrogating an outstanding debt for this land, so that loans he provided will not be canceled at the close of the sabbatical year. And he can acquire property that does not serve as a guarantee, that is movable property along with it. Okay, so the unbolded print is explaining a little bit of this. There are specific modes of acquisition for movable property, but if one is acquiring any amount of land at the same time as the movable property, the mode of acquisition employed to acquire the land suffices for the acquisition of the movable property as well. Apparently, any amount of land is subject to first fruits, whereas according to Ula, a tree acquired with less than 16 cubits of land surrounding it draws nourishment from the land surrounding it and is exempt from the first fruits. Okay, so the upshot here is we don't have to understand all the laws regarding what this Mishnah and Peah is talking about. The bottom line is, it seems like the amount of land is not, it's not 16 cubits of land. So Ula, if Ula's statement about 16 cubits of land is the one that we're supposed to be following, it should be consistent everywhere in every Mishnah when you're talking about acquiring a tree and dealing with first fruits from the tree. Here it seems to be a Mishnah that says any amount of land is sufficient for a tree, for the owner of the tree to bring the first fruits. The Gemara rejects this with what are we dealing here? We're dealing with wheat, which is subject to the halachot of first fruits and require very little land to nourish it. So here it didn't specifically say a tree. So wheat then is not like a tree, and the roots of the wheat are don't extend nearly as far as 16 cubits.
I don't understand.
You had what, Bess?
I don't understand. Michael is letting you have his wheat on your property. If it's
No,
wheat, I don't get it.
No, so just a second. What are the conditions here? Where did it go?
Everybody else gets it.
No. The owner of land of any size is obligated in payah and first fruits, and a lender can write a document that prevents the sabbatical year from abrogating an outstanding debt for this land, such loans be provided that he provided will not be canceled at the close of the sabbatical year, and he can acquire property that does not serve as a guarantee, movable property along with it. Okay, so Akiva says land of any size, the first fruits, right. So if we apply that law to Michael owning trees that are in my property, Ula would say that he can't bring first fruits from it unless he also owns 16 cubits of land all around the tree. Akiva is saying no, apparently from this Mishnah, any amount of land is sufficient for him owning my tree and then being subject to all the laws regarding the tree. But the Gemara is saying no. This whole subject of payah is talking about wheat. It's not talking about trees, which I think is true. The law of payah, leaving a corner of your field, is about wheat or barley. It's not about an orchard. Okay? So payah applies. The law of the harvest from the corner of the field applies to a field of wheat or barley or corn or something like that, or soybeans, something that's grown up from the ground like that, as opposed to an orchard. Payah does not apply to orchards.
So that whole paragraph could have been taken out and we didn't need to read it.
No, there's an element there about any amount of land is subject to all these laws. So any amount of land, which seems to go against what Ula says you need a tree. So that would mean that Michael's tree that's on my property would be subject to first fruits. But any amount of land. Whereas Ula says it's not subject to first fruits because it doesn't have 16 cubits of land around it. So the Gemara is answering, no, no, no. Rabbi Akiva here in Peah is talking about a wheat field. He's not talking about a fruit tree. Okay, so that's the distinction. Okay, the Gemara comments that the language of the Mishnah is also precise, as it teaches land of any size, which indicates even a minuscule amount, and all normal trees certainly require more land than that. The Gemara affirms, learn from it, that it is so. The Gemara further suggests, come in here, proof from a Baraita, from the Tosefta on Ma'asrot, which is dealing with tithes. If there is a tree, part of which is in Eretz Yisrael, and part of which is outside of Eretz Yisrael, okay, so the boundaries of the land of Israel determine, right, anything within the land of Israel is subject to the agricultural laws for the land of Israel. Diaspora, land outside of Israel, is not subject to those agricultural laws. Okay, so sabbatical year, letting the land lie fallow, tithes, things like that only apply in the land of Israel. So let's say you have an olive tree that is on the border of the land of Israel and Syria. Okay, so if there is a tree, part of which is in Eretz Yisrael and part of which is outside of Eretz Yisrael, and by the way, those borders are kind of fluid, so we don't know exactly where the border was. Okay, it is considered as though untithed produce, that is produce that is subject to the halachot of trumot and tithes, and non-sacred produce, that is produce that is exempt from the halachot of trumot and tithes, are mixed together in each one of these trees' fruits. So it's considered as mixed. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, with regard to the fruits and the part of the tree that is growing in a place where there is an obligation to separate tithes, that is, in Eretz Yisrael, the owner is obligated to separate tithes. With regard to the fruits that are growing in a place where there is an exemption from separating tithes, that is, outside of Eretz Yisrael, the owner is exempt. So this might best get into your question about the branches of the tree. Let's say the branches of the tree are in the Israel part, and then there are some branches of the tree that could be in non-Israel land. So that's how you would determine. I don't imagine that the trunk of the tree is straddling the border. So I can't imagine anybody drawing a border where the trunk of the tree goes through it. I mean,
Well,
you have in Canada, like there's this library or bookstore in Vermont that half of it's in Vermont and half of it's in Canada. Okay, so there are buildings like that, and I think there's a house on North Portal Street between Silver Spring and DC where the house is in Montgomery County, but the garage is in DC, something like. So there are some bizarre circumstances like this, and then there's all questions about taxation and all that. But okay, I don't think the ancients would draw a border that would go right through the trunk of a tree.
well, a tree is a good marker. So if you go from this
I-
point
okay,
to the
yes,
tree and from the tree.
Yes,
to
but
the-
I think the tree would be within the boundary. I don't think the tree would be straddling the boundary. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking, but maybe it is. Okay, still, the branches, whether the tree is totally in,
branches are easy.
okay, the branches do grow over the border. You could imagine the branches growing over the border. So Shimon ben Gamliel is saying the fruit of the branches that are not in Israel are not subject to all those laws. The fruit of the branches that are in Israel are subject to those laws. Whereas Yehuda Nasi says the whole tree is subject to, is considered mixed.
Did
Okay.
they actually draw a border?
I don't know. There could have been. There could have been. I mean, people had to. Um, well, look, when all of the tribes of Israel were in Israel, there had to be those who were at the far edges, like Menashe, I think, is as a tribe that is at the northern boundary. There had to be a boundary line beyond which the land of Israel doesn't reach anymore. Now, King David extended the boundary, so I don't know how that impacted the tribes' family plots and agricultural land. I don't know. The Bible doesn't talk about those details. And then also, when territory was conquered by the Assyrians, then what happened? Even though it might, we can ask the question today about Palestinian territory, which is in biblical land of Israel property. So let's say a Jew owned land that is in Palestinian territory. So does that Jew, just because the laws of the sabbatical year do apply in Israel today, would that, if a Jew was allowed to own land within Palestinian territory, because I don't think there is such a case today, but let's say the Palestinian Authority allowed a Jew to own land within the Palestinian Authority, then that land should be subject to the sabbatical law. Even though it's in Palestinian state, Palestinian administration, it's within the land of Israel. But this is theoretical because I don't think such a thing exists.
Hebron.
Well, yes. Well, okay. That little pocket of Jews who live in Hebron around, yeah. Well, I think they were accounted for when Israel drew the borders with the Palestinians for what Palestinian territory is. It's also, the community of Beit El is, which is in Palestinian territory, is considered under Israeli administration. So it's not under Palestinian administration. There's also Ma'ale Adumim. So if you leave Jerusalem on the way to the Dead Sea, so directly west of Jerusalem is the town of Ma'ale Adumim, a beautiful place to live, but technically speaking, it's in pre-1967 boundary, which means it's not in Israel proper, but it's under Israeli administration. So there isn't any Jewish property under Palestinian administration. Okay, the Gemara comments. They disagree only in that one sage, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, holds that there is retroactive designation, and therefore it's assumed that the nourishment drawn from Eretz Yisrael sustained the fruit that grew on that side of the tree, and the nourishment drawn from outside Yisrael sustained the fruit that grew there. And one sage, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, holds there's no retroactive designation, and the fruit is considered mixed. But if the tree grew entirely in a place where there is an exemption from separating tithes, that is, outside Eretz Yisrael, all agree that the owner is exempt, even though the tree might have roots within 16 cubits of Eretz Yisrael and draw nourishment from there. So Michael lives outside of Israel, and his tree is within 16 cubits of the border of Israel. Therefore, the roots of the tree draw nourishment from the land of Israel. This presents a difficulty for the opinion of Ula, as he claims that the place from where a tree draws its nourishment is decisive with regard to first fruits. The Gemara answers with, what are we dealing here? We're dealing with a case where a rock divides the roots up to the trunk. And therefore, it's possible to distinguish between the parts of the tree to draw nutrients from the Eretz Yisrael and the parts that draw nutrients from outside Eretz Yisrael. Gemara asks, if so, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Why does he view the fruits as being a mixture? The Gemara answers, he holds that although there is a division between the roots, they cannot be distinguished from one another, as they then become mixed in the body of the tree. The Gemara asks, and with regard to what principle do they disagree? The Gemara answers, one sage, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, holds the air above the ground mixes the nutrients, and one sage, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, holds this part of the tree stands alone, and this part of the tree stands alone. From the roots up to the branches, it is as if the tree were cut along the line of the border. Okay, so, all right, we got 3 more paragraphs till we get to a Mishnah. Let's see if we can do that. The Gemara raises a difficulty against Ula's opinion from a different perspective. And do roots extend 16 cubits and no more? Then we learn in a Mishnah back in 25b, one must distance a tree 25 cubits from a cistern. This indicates that tree roots reach more than 16 cubits. Abaye said the roots extend farther, but they weaken the ground only up to 16 cubits. With regard to an area any more distant than that, they do not weaken the ground. Concerning this matter, the Gemara relates that when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, Reish Lakish raised a dilemma before Rabbi Yochanan. With regard to a tree that is within 16 cubits of a boundary, what is the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan said to him, the owner is a robber, and one does not bring first fruits from it. By contrast, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he related that Rabbi Yochanan says both in the case of a tree that's close to a boundary and a tree that leans into a neighbor's yard, one brings first fruits and recites the verses, as it was on this condition that Joshua apportioned Eretz Yisrael to the Jewish people, that is, that they would not be particular about such matters. Okay, so in the end, we're not so particular. Okay. We're going to stop here, and we will pick up again in January. Like I said at the start of the class, we are off now for the whole month of December because of my trip to Israel, and we will we'll pick back up the first Sunday in January, whatever that Sunday is, like the 4th, maybe the 5th, something like that. All right. Yes, Bess?
No, saying it's the 4th. It's Hello Dolly.
Okay, that's right. Hello, Dolly, right. Which we saw last night, Lenore and I.
And?
It's a fun production.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not a great play, but it's...
I never liked it.
But a couple of songs are fun. The productions are fun. The choreography is really good.
Costumes, I hear, were good.
Costumes, yes, they were good. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Good luck.
Happy Hanukkah.